Okay, hello world. This is Sexy Flannel Guy speaking to you, and it is October 30th, 2023. And I want to title this video Israel in the month of October. So you've got America had 9/11 and Israel had 10/7. Just a few days ago, October 7th, and the Hamas invaders just came in through Gaza, came up through the tunnels, which were in some cases 200 feet below the ground, And they came up and they grabbed women who were clutching their children, pulled them into trucks. We haven't seen anything like this since the Holocaust, World War II. I think there's still like 211 hostages. Not quite sure. The number changes a lot. No, there's 1,046. The numbers are changing every day, sometimes three times a day, because they get some back. There are 500 bodies that are unidentifiable, and because they've been so mutilated, so badly mutilated, they can't even get the DNA out of them. A lot of them they set on fire, yelling "gas to Jews," in Arabic, of course, or "itbach al Yehud." Itbach al Yehud means kill the Jew. That's Arabic. And they just captured children, women, mothers, grandmothers, and of course men. And these people have been brutally tortured, raped. There was the one case we saw in video wherein the Israeli young lady was was in bad shape. She wasn't going to last long. And they dragged her through the streets of Gaza City. And the people were the Hamas people, the Arabs of Gaza, were shouting at her as if she had done something wrong and she was the hostage. Well, she was in bad shape. Like I said, I don't know if she was beaten beyond within an inch of her life or she was raped, what had happened to her, but she wasn't going to live long. Yesterday, I listened to an interview that an American set up an interview with a mother whose daughter was 21 years old, Yadid. And Yadid had been, she was at that music festival that near the border of Gaza in Israel. So in Israel, these young Israelis were having a music concert. I heard from some sources it was an LGBTQ music concert. In other cases, they said music concert. They didn't say it was LGBTQ, so who knows? Could have been a combination, but these were 20-somethings. And this woman's daughter, Yadid, who was 21 years old, she had made the phone call or texted her mother. The phone went out. She was with a group of friends. They had fled the music festival. Everyone's shouting, running in different directions. And she was on some road somewhere. They found the road. Some of her friends had made it back home alive. She did not. And then the IDF knocked on the mom's door shortly thereafter, a couple days later, and they had, through DNA testing, found that the daughter was dead. And they did not tell the mother what was the manner of her death. So she doesn't know whether the daughter just died quickly or was tortured, what happened to her. She was a commander in the Israeli army, but she was in civilian clothes. She was a civilian at that time. And the mother had to sit Shiva, and of course it sat Shiva, and went through all of her mourning, her crying, her grief, and pulled herself together for the interview. And it was quite the story. I was listening to it for about 25 minutes as I was driving, and I finally had to just pull in the house and end it. It was just too much for me to listen to. She had to make her peace with her 21-year-old daughter's death. And the mother, whose name I can't recall right now, was making some good points and talking about the idea that you have this ideology from Islam, from Hamas, and you can't kill an idea. You can You can get the hostages back, whichever ones may be alive. That doesn't seem to be much of a chance, to tell you the truth. Um, you can kill the people who are attacking you in self-defense. You can do lots of things, but you can't kill an idea. And she was talking about just this ideology that Hamas attaches itself to. Um, and that's really something to think about. How do we get rid of these virus-like ideas, these idea pathogens, if you will? And she herself works for some sort of lab, a biological lab of sorts, through the medical pharmacy, something or other. And she had a hard time speaking purely in English. She was mixing Hebrew and English back and forth, code switching. And she was talking about how viruses spread and how they sometimes mitigate, sometimes they accelerate their reproduction. And she was trying to, through analogy, draw links between idea pathogens such as that of Hamas, the terrorist group, the proxy group of Iran. And, me being an American Jew, I've been following this all the time. In the morning, in the night, before bed, I check the news. I get notifications on my phone, eh? And so I've been keeping abreast of what's going on in the Middle East very closely. And I have friends who've moved there. I was part of a community in Los Angeles many years ago, just a few years ago actually, and moved back to Michigan about less than a year and a half ago. So I haven't been gone from California that long, and part of the Jewish community there, and I have friends who moved to Yerushalayim and different parts of Israel, and. So this is definitely a defensive war. They're fighting for their lives over there. And to the north, you have Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is being backed by Iran as well, another proxy organization, eh? And they're trying to get Jordan to come into it again to sort of circle Israel on three sides like they did in 1967, 1947, and many other times as well. As Abdul Nasser said in the 1950s, we shall sweep them into the sea. This was all over the Arabic language newspapers at the time. I remember I was at the Defense Language Institute learning Arabic in those days. Well, not the 1950s. What am I talking about? Not that old, eh? But when I was a young man, and it wasn't the 50s. But still, we were translating things from Abdul Nasser, from Arabic into English, just to gain more fluency in translation, listening to South Amerique, which was Voice of America. And so we, as a matter of fact, one of my professors, Arabic professors, was using some of the speeches by Abdul Nasser, the president of Egypt, just for some fast translation. And in my case, I was learning Syrian dialect of Arabic. We started with Modern Standard Arabic, which is like newscaster, sort of a neutral type of Arabic. And then I learned Syrian dialect. But then my professor wanted us to hear some Egyptian Arabic, just so we could become acquainted with it, because that's what most of the Arabic movies are in Egyptian Arabic. And he used some audio from Abdul Nasser. And in that, I remember translating stuff about we shall sweep them into the sea, and talking about the Jews, about Abdul Nasser was calling them monkeys and dogs. And they're very open about it then, and they're still open about it. Eh? It hasn't changed. Things don't change. What's that saying in French? Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. The more things change, the more it's the same thing. Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. And so, what's alarming is that a lot of us thought that anti-Semitism was something from the past, from World War II. So World War II, 80 years ago, thereabouts? And, in high school we learn, at least in America, we learn about, in world history, we learn about the Holocaust. They're teaching it less and less these days. I was looking at some polls, and a great deal of Americans don't know about the Holocaust anymore because a lot of the activist younger teachers are refusing to teach the Holocaust. I know it's hard to believe if you're my generation, but there are teachers in world history who are not teaching about the Holocaust within World War II. But the anti-Semitism been growing for a long time. It's been expanding. It's been amplifying all over the world. You've prior to 10/7, which was the recent attack by Hamas against Israel. You see amping up a lot of, gas them on the streets of Paris, yelling at the Jewish community to gas them. Hitler hadn't finished his job, they were saying in French. And again, yelling in Arabic, Itbach al Yehud, in a chant sort of way. And, the anti-Semitism in America, in the United States, remains one of the highest rates of discrimination, hate crimes, if you will, hate speech, if you will. I don't like these terms, hate speech and hate crimes. They don't make any sense. You commit a crime, you commit a crime, but labeled as hate crimes, if you will. And so ever since 10/7, you had maybe a 24-hour period in which the world said, good for you, Israel, you're fighting back. You're trying to save yourselves. You're under attack. Remember that this attack on Israel was not provoked in any way. No one expected this war. Nobody wanted a war with Hamas. And it just took, within 2 days, there were protests breaking out all around the world, including leading universities, and they weren't in favor of the Jews of Israel, they were in favor of Hamas, right? And I want my audience to understand that Hamas is a terrorist group. It's a religio-political group, or you could say political-religious group. It's a group that mixes radical politics and Islam together, and it is a group that absolutely controls the population of Gaza, which is 2.5 million people in a very small area. Not because they started out large, but because they reproduce like crazy. They have enormous families in Gaza. They're being told to reproduce at big rates. They're being encouraged to do so. It is within Gaza, it's a society that is, I want you to listen up. For those of you who are on the far left, my people I know who are on the political left, who are always talking about gay rights or transgender rights and are always talking about women's rights and feminism. So check this out. In Gaza, women don't have a lot of rights. They have to wear hijab. They get less education than men receive. Neither genders really get that much education in Gaza. It's a police state. It's a fascist state. You don't have any chance at all if you're so-called LGBTQ, all these letters they keep adding. You don't have a chance in that society. So if you're on the political left and you're listening to this and you're not against Hamas, there's a huge problem here. In other words, that you are an incredible hypocrite. Why are you not protesting against Hamas and in favor of Israel? That's the question. But in some ways, the media is deliberately spreading chaos, and this should come as no surprise to you. I was listening just a couple days ago or so. President Biden was saying that Hamas does not speak for the Palestinians. And then I heard on the radio today, maybe it was from yesterday or from this morning, Vice President Kamala Harris said that we must not conflate Hamas with the Palestinians. She repeated, under no circumstances should we conflate Hamas with the Palestinians. Now, here's what I want to ask. How does Biden or Harris know this? It seems to stand in complete contradistinction to the facts. So, for example, Gaza used to be Egyptian territory. And in the 1967 war, which it was a fight for its very existence, Israel was, and it captured that little piece of land called Gaza, that area. It's right along the Mediterranean, seaport, beautiful sand, beaches. You could have had developed a Singapore there due to trade and tourism, what have you, but they didn't do that. It was Egyptian owned, and then during the war, 1967, it was taken by Israel. And then, because Israel didn't want to have those enemies right there up against the borders of Israel, and then Israel turned it over to the Arabs in the year 2005. But, here's the clincher, in less than a year, in the year 2006, the Arabs had installed a government run by Hamas via elections. And if memory serves, it was 96%, 92%, it was almost 100% unanimous that the Arabs of Gaza wanted Hamas to be the ruling party. And it had already been established in the Middle East that Hamas was a terrorist organization. It was not a new thing. It was not unknown. Hamas had been very active in various parts of that part of the world. And so the Arabs of Gaza knowingly voted for Hamas. So my first question for President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris would be this. How can you assert that Hamas does not speak for the Palestinians, or, to put it in the words of Kamala Harris, under no circumstances should we conflate Hamas with Palestinians? How can you make such a statement? At least the Arabs in Gaza voted for Hamas. Furthermore, I was telling you a few minutes ago about the Israeli woman that was brought half alive through the streets of Gaza. That film escaped and went viral. And it was checked by technocrats. That was a legit video, no AI to speak of. People are accusing artificial intelligence of making videos now, but you have people that are checking them. And so turns out that particular episode, men were on the streets walking up, and you had some young, very young, 18-year-olds or such, Hamas operatives that were in the tunnels pulling the Israelis and the surprise down into the tunnels and pulling them through and whatnot, and they were in the streets, and these men were walking up and hugging the Hamas terrorists. So who's the terrorist and who's the civilian, eh? I mean, if they're walking up and they're yelling Allahu Akbar and they're hugging them, this shows you the population is in favor of what the terrorists had done, which is capture hostages and abuse them. And you had women over there shouting Allahu Akbar. They were celebrating. So I don't see any evidence with the voting patterns, although there was only one election, that was in 2006. I mean, no election since then. That all the Arabs of the Middle East, that area of the world, tend toward authoritarians, tend toward tyrants like President Abbas, which is from the PLO group, right? He was voted one time into office, and there was nary ever another election that ever occurred. President Assad of Syria, President Assad, he was voted into office exactly one time, and there's never been another election there in Syria. So whether it's Syria, whether it's Syria, whether it's Jordan, whether it's various places that surround Israel, they tend toward authoritarian leaders, in some cases monarchical leaders, like King Hussein of Jordan. This is a very small percentage of the Hashmonite kingdom, which is another scion from the House of Saud, the really Saudis that are ruling the people of Jordan, who would call themselves ethnically Palestinian. The country of Jordan itself is about 86%, quote unquote, Palestinian. They call themselves Jordanians now because they've been there for 3 generations. But I had an Arabic professor who was Jordanian, and I'd been to his house for dinner, his wife and his family and whatnot. And so one time he was saying, well, we're technically Palestinians, and I was a young man, didn't know that much of the world when I was, 20 years old. But he said, I said, but I thought you were Jordanian. He said, well, our nationality is Jordanian, but our grandparents, they came from this, they identify as Palestinians after the 1947, and they tried to destroy the Jews, and the Jews won, and so here we are in Jordan. So, but he said, my generation, we've already been we're 3rd generation Jordanians, so we call ourselves Jordanians. And he was the one who turned me on to the fact that 86%, and I've looked it up since, I've researched it. So you have Jordan, which is essentially a Palestinian country, but it's being run mercilessly, monarchically by the Hashmonite kingdom. It's called the Hashmonite Kingdom of Jordan. It's run by Saudis. So again, this whole area of the world leans toward authoritarianism, monarchs, and so forth, except for the small country of Israel, which is the size of the American state of Rhode Island. That's how small Israel is. Israel, you can travel from the Med, west to east in Israel in 40 minutes by car. From north to the tippy top of the north to the tippy bottom of the south in Eilat, it takes 6 hours, right? When I was living in California, in Salinas, it would take 6 hours to drive to LA, because California was a very long state. You could put entire countries, depending on which ones there are, within the state of California. That's how large California is, but it's a long state. And me driving from Salinas to LA was 6 hours. That was one little tiny segment of California. So that's the entire length of Israel. A very, very small country. The Jews only have one country in the world, Israel. The Arabs have many, many countries. Pull out an atlas and count all the Arab countries there are. Lots of Arab countries. So the point being is that this was completely a defensive war, and the anti-Semitism is being heated up all around the world. More than ever since 10/7, you'll see reports on Harvard on the campus of Harvard University, the students protesting in favor of Hamas and not the Israeli state, the Jews. There was a report came out today from Cornell University, once again backing up Hamas. Oh, I lost my train of thought. I was making the point that Biden and Harris were saying that there's no connection between Hamas and the Palestinians. This is a ridiculous statement that doesn't seem to bear any sort of reality. So once again, you've got the Arabs of Gaza vote for Hamas. You've got the Arabs of Gaza. This is what the Arabs of Gaza are, what the news is calling the Palestinians. But there's all kinds of Arab groups there. To say Palestinian, it's a bit misleading. And here in the West, we just see it all as Jews and Palestinians. But Israel is 70% Jewish and 30% Arab. And so the Israeli Arabs, about 30%, they don't refer to themselves as Palestinians. They're Israeli Arabs. Many of them, they don't have to fight in the IDF, the army. Many of them choose to do so. The Bedouins, don't call themselves Palestinians. Most of them side with Israel. Many of them fight in the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces. Um, I've watched interviews with Bedouins who are commanders in the Israeli army. They wouldn't associate themselves with the Palestinian identity. You have Druze, and the Druze are a group of Arabs or Muslims from a mountain in Syria called Jabal Druze. So they're named after the mountain. And they're a small minority of Muslims, just like Mormons. Latter-day Saints, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is a church that added a book, the Book of Mormon, the D&C Doctrine and Covenants, the Pearl of Great Price. They added holy books after the New Testament. The Druze are a Muslim group that added a book after the Quran. And in Islam, it's supposed to be, according to Islam, the last prophet and the last holy book. And so when they added a book as an extension to the Quran, the Muslim world doesn't like the Druze. So it's, if you want to look them up, it's Druze in English. Druze. So they don't call themselves Palestinians either. So you have Druze, you have the Bedouins, you have the Israeli Arabs. When I hear the word Palestinian, mostly what I'm thinking of are Arabs from Judea and Samaria, Yehud and Shomron, which the world calls the West Bank of Jordan. It's an area pretty much east of Jerusalem. So when I hear Palestinians, I'm thinking of the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, what they call the PA. They have their own passports. When you tell me Palestinian, I'm not thinking of Gazans. I'm not thinking of Israeli Arabs. I'm not thinking of Bedouins. I'm not thinking of Druze. When you tell me Palestinian, because I'm aware of what's going on there, is I'm thinking, Palestinian Authority, the PA, with President Abbas, who's really a tyrant, has only been elected one time, and he goes in there and kills his own people if they don't fall into line. He keeps them poor, keeps them downtrodden, continues to take an aid from the United States of America for his own family, does not disperse the money to the common people in the Palestinian Authority area. Again, if you're just an American who's not really aware of international news and politics and demographics and geography, you just see Jews and Palestinians, but this is not the way it works in that part of the world. It's a very ignorant lens through which to see the Levant. And also the last thing I'll say, that in Gaza, I'm already at 28 minutes, in Gaza, is that Hamas, when they were voted into office and they took over, because they were voted, the will of the people, if you will, the will of the people put Hamas in place, they immediately took control of the schools. And so that was 17 years ago. And for the last 17 years, every school in Gaza has been run by Hamas. And we've been watching videos come out for the last 17 years. Sometimes you have these workers, United Nations, UNESCO. UNESCO runs a lot of the schools over there. But what happens is Hamas threatens them and stages these plays where they dress some of the kids up like Israelis, and they kill them on stage, and they yell Itbach al Yehud, and there's a lot of propaganda, blatant propaganda against Jews, calling them dogs and so forth, and the videos, we've been seeing these videos for 17 years. If you haven't seen the videos, that's on you, because you're not paying attention. And so, you have kids from young ages to 17 years old who have been brainwashed. They're true believers in this form of Islam. How are you going to tell me, President Biden or VP Kamala Harris, how are you going to tell me that Hamas and Palestinians are separate? Now, okay, it's true, the so-called, the people who consistently call themselves Palestinians are the Palestinian Authority again, in what the world calls the west bank of the Jordan, pretty much a little north and east of Jerusalem. But the American news, when Biden and Kamala Harris are talking about Palestinians, they don't know these nuances. They don't know these factions. They're just thinking that Arabs from that part of the world are Palestinians. I'm not sure. I mean, the Gazans are Gazans. But the Gazans of Gaza, whom Biden and Harris would label as Palestinians, they would call them Palestinians, are certainly hand in glove with Hamas. They're supporting Hamas. They're giving their children to Hamas. They go to the Hamas school system. They're cheering when they kill Israelis. How is this separate? So I would submit to my audience that this whole idea that Biden and Harris are trying to push this narrative that Hamas does not speak for the Palestinians, like they're two separate things, at least in Gaza, is a false narrative. It's absolutely fake news. It's not true. Anyone who knows the area, knows Arabs, knows Israelis, tell you this is not the case. It's a bunch of fake news. It's propaganda. We need to throw our support behind the Jewish state. They deserve it. They are the victims in this case, but they're fighting to win. And another place where you see this virulent anti-Semitism, which means Jew hatred. Anti-Semitism is racism against Jews. And another place where we see this is the Biden administration telling Israel to slow down and cease fire. What do you mean cease fire? Hamas is a fascist group, just like the Nazis, Yimach Shmom, were a fascist group. The death toll is just, in percentages of the population and scale, it was just like America being hit on 9/11. That's why I said America had 9/11 and Israel has 10/7. And we'll be talking about this for hundreds of years. This is how bad this attack against the civilians of Israel was on 10/7 and continuing. What's this business about telling Israelis to stop? Oh, they're saying things like excessive force, lack of proportionality. Now, I'm a historian. I'm teaching special education now, but I was teaching history for the last 15 years prior to a year and a half ago. And my PhD is in history. It's actually medieval studies. It's interdisciplinary. It's an interdisciplinary PhD, but it's the classes are heavily in history. So I think it's fair to call myself historian. And I'm not aware of any situation in the world in modern history wherein a country just gets attacked and every nation is allowed to defend itself. The American government says this, the French government, everyone says that Israel has the right to defend itself, just like France does in Colombia and Ecuador and Mexico. All these countries have a right to defend themselves. But no one yells proportionality or excessive force or war crimes when they fight back, right? So when we fought against, and the Allies fought against the Nazis during World War II, no one was yelling proportionality, war crimes, excessive force. We pretty near leveled Dresden, Germany. We brought Germany to its knees regardless of civilians. And I, by the way, I want to say that I've always been taught that we leveled Dresden, but I was in Dresden in 2019, and there were a lot of old buildings in Dresden. So when they say that we, meaning the Americans, leveled Dresden, I think it was like mostly leveled it, but there are a lot of old buildings there. I was at a very, very old church that was many hundreds of years old in Dresden in 2019. But that's a rabbit hole. That's me getting off task there. But no, this is Hamas and the Arabs of Gaza are hand in glove. They are the same people. There's no separating them. And the anti-Semitism, New Zealand, Paris, of course, London. I mean, so I was talking to a friend that I Zoom call with from time to time. I go to England a lot. This is the first year I didn't get to England in 2023 because I was in Italy, Greece, and Turkey. I can't be everywhere, right? I've got work full time, animals on my farm. But so I make friends and I sometimes Zoom call them. Sometimes we text through a text app. And they were showing me videos of in London, the capital of England, English people shouting "Itbach al Yehud," yelling to gas the Jews. This is not a reference to Israel. This is a reference to World War II. This is purely Jew hatred. Now, granted, in London, it wasn't your average Englishman that was doing it. The people that were doing demonstrations and yelling to gas the Jews were immigrants to London, to England from the Middle East. They were speaking in Arabic, yelling in Arabic, and you'd hear the English as well. And when you heard the English, a lot of times it was with an accent, an Arabic accent. So it wasn't the case that there were some Englishmen that appeared to be not of immigrant stock, right? I mean, it was a mixed multitude, but mostly these people were ethnically Arab that were yelling "gas the Jews," and it was in London. Again, it's Cornell University, Harvard University. Harvard University is supposed to be where our best and our brightest go for school, and they're backing Hamas. That's akin to backing the Nazis during World War II. This is shameful. What an upside down world we live in today. And, you live here in the magnificent North like I do. You can see stuff with clarity. Here in the magnificent North, we still have practical sense. We have common sense. We have that simple, practical wisdom that many of our people on the East Coast and the West Coast have long since, taken leave of their senses. They're bereft of this sort of common wisdom that we have anymore. Look, Israel, like all nations, has a right to defend itself, and Israel should not be stopping. Stop yelling proportionality, excessive force, war crime. What do you mean war crimes? War crimes. The war crimes were the crimes were committed on October 7th on a Jewish holiday when the Arabs, when Hamas, the Arabs of Gaza, attacked the population of Israel. Those were the war crimes. What are you talking about, war crimes? When do you hear, when people fight back in a defensive posture, when do you hear war crimes? It's only when the Jews do it. So again, prove me wrong, give me some data points, but my understanding of history, what I'm aware of, is that it's only the Jews that get accused of the war crimes and excessive force and whatnot. We wouldn't tolerate this in the United States of America. If there was a population on our border that had been lobbing missiles at us for 17 years, I mean, in the last 17 years since Hamas took control of Gaza, it's been like every 6 months, the barrage, it's relentless, it's chronic. If the United States of America had a nation at our border that was consistently lobbing missiles at us, we wouldn't be going for, proportionality. Don't engage in excessive force. War crime. No, it's called you defend yourself at all costs and you go balls to the wall. That's what you do. You go balls to the wall. You don't sit there and fight for one day and sit on your laurels. You're just inviting them to reload. You fight to win. You are attacked. You must subdue the enemies at your border who are trying to wipe out your civilian population, right? Read the Hamas charter. That's what I want to leave you with. You can find it online. It calls for the killing of Jews. And ever since Hamas, the political religious group, was birthed, it lives with this ideology that the land is Palestinian forever. This is a new kind of idea. There was never a nation called Palestine, but this is an ideology that's been insidious in the Western media, and our young people are starting to absorb this through osmosis. Doesn't make any sense. It's an ahistorical assertion, but it's been gaining notoriety just because people are absorbing this stuff through social media. America wouldn't put up with these attacks, and Israel shouldn't either. And that's all I have to say to you from the magnificent north, signing out.